The Raiders back at Allegiant and looking for a win. Can the defense rise up to stop Deshaun Watson and the Browns? We take you inside the red zone as Scott Hanson tells us why it could be Sack City for the Raiders. Plus, Denzel Ward, Davante Adams. This one's going to be good. NFL Media's Chris Rose is here to talk key matchups and to pass or to run. That is the question we ask Raider Nation Radio's Vince Sapienza. It's all ahead on the Silver and Black Show, starting now. Welcome into the Silver and Black Show. I'm Amber Theoharis. It's week 4, and we don't know who the Raiders are. Are they the underdogs who went into Baltimore and scored 20 points in the second half to beat the Ravens? Or are they the favorites who got smacked around by Andy Dalton and the Panthers at home? The up and down nature of this season means one thing. This team hasn't found its identity. But neither has the 1-2 Browns, who just lost to the Giants. This weekend, the Raiders need to make a business decision, it's been the buzzword, to handle their business and get back to 500 at home. To talk about this matchup, we welcome in Mr. Red Zone himself, my good friend Scott Hanson, joining us. Hey, Hanson, it's good to see you, my friend.
Amber, good to be with you here. Good to be with you. Yeah, we got a couple of 1-2 teams trying to figure out who they are here in the first month of the season.
Yeah, I like that you wore your Raiders black. We appreciate that. But give me overall, your thoughts on what you're expecting in this matchup.
You know, what version of Gardner Minshew do you get? I think there's two things, actually. What version of Gardner Minshew do you get? And two, did the Raiders learn the lesson that they had in front of them in a very painful fashion last Sunday? And that is this. You cannot expect to get anything less than the best from any NFL team. And yet there are a lot of young players on the Raiders roster. And I am convinced that when you go watching video of your opponent last week, the Carolina Panthers, and the Panthers look like one of, if not the worst team in the league, you're sitting there saying, okay, it can't help but get into the human brain. We're gonna put the helmets on, strap them up. We're going out and get this home victory. And they got whopped.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Dalton was a huge part of that, but the rest of the Panthers they had written off, and it wasn't just like Andy Dalton. It wasn't just Andy Dalton. So the Raiders had a very painful lesson displayed to them. Whether or not they learn that lesson, we'll begin to find out here this weekend, because there's a lot of bad video on the Browns. Mm-hmm. And if the Raiders go through looking at that and saying, oh, this is another team that we think we can handle and it's in our building and it could be another rude awakening. And I know no one at Allegiant Stadium wants to see that back to back.
And you know what? We've seen those surprises across the league. That's just the NFL. There's parity, so you can't sleep on anybody. Last time Gardner Minshew saw the Browns in 2023, the Colts, they lost by 1 point. So the Browns have seen Minshew up close. That was a good game. Minshew threw for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. But guess what the Colts did that game? They ran, Scott, for 168 yards. So he had a ground game, and then the passing game worked. What is the formula for Minshew to find success against the Browns this time?
Well, I think it is like any NFL team, any football team. If you can establish the run, everything opens back up. And Minshew is very good when he gets legitimate play action fakes. The problem is the Raiders have not been able to establish a threatening run game that can put the stress on the defense to creep that extra man up into the box that lets you take shots over the top. Brock Bowers has been seeing his, but Davante Adams is not. He's off to a decent start, but Davante, when he's going well, is number 1, number 2, number 3 in the NFL, and we haven't seen that quite yet. So it is absolutely established the run, although that has not been, that has just not been the case for the Raiders thus far.
On the other side, the Raiders definitely need to stop the run, but, Deshaun Watson can run. To go along with your theme of what you just said, Deshaun Watson at one time was a top 5 quarterback in this league. I mean, that was many years ago. But what are you expecting for him? Should the Raiders not sleep on him either?
No, of course you can't sleep on him, because this would be the type of game where he would come back and show Deshaun Watson, Houston Texans circa, 2019 Pro Bowl Deshaun Watson in. However, Deshaun's been struggling. I mean, he is on a very short list of quarterbacks who absolutely desperately need to have a big close to the first month of the season. I think Daniel Jones is on that list. Trevor Lawrence is now on that list. Gardner Minshew might be on that list, but Deshaun Watson's right up there towards the top. I mean, there are some folks in Cleveland that are kind of looking at their wristwatch and the calendar saying, it might be time to hit the reset button on the most important position on the field. Deshaun can still sting you, though, so don't sleep on him. And you get the Amari Cooper revenge game.
Revenge game.
This is the first time that Cooper has faced them. I believe when he was with the Cowboys, he was on, I think it was 2021, and he actually had tested positive for COVID in 2021 and was not able to play. So I'm sure you guys have the stats there, but this should be the first game against the Raiders since his departure for Amari Cooper, and Cooper's coming off a 2-touchdown performance from last week.
How can the Raiders, though, take advantage of what's going on with the Browns' offensive line? I mean, right now, there's no Wyatt Teller. The tackles, Jedrick Willis and Jack Conklin, they're banged up. The swing tackle even, James Hudson, he's also dealing with an injury. But we all know the Raiders' D-line is banged up as well. Is this an opportunity, though, for that Raiders line to take advantage of that?
No, 100%. That's the key to victory right there. If Antonio Pierce and the coaching staff can design up some pressure, that dominated the game. If you watch last week's Browns-Giants game, it was Deshaun Watson was seeing ghosts, running for his life, doing this instead of looking downfield, and that made all the difference in the world. And the Raiders are capable of that. The Raiders, we all know, are 100% capable of that. Whether or not they do it, well, we got to see come Sunday afternoon. But yeah, you put pressure on Deshaun Watson, it's going to lead to turnovers, lead to short fields, lead to scoring opportunities, and that's the recipe for successful football.
Yeah, 8 sacks he took against the Giants, as you just mentioned last week. And the Raiders actually blitz at a very high rate. I was kind of surprised to see they have the 5th highest rate in the NFL. We'll see if they'll bring that pressure through the blitz. Going back to what the Browns are doing on offense, they don't have Nick Chubb. What are you seeing from this running backs by committee approach that Stefanski is using? Is it a threat?
Not tremendously. Jerome Ford is the guy that they want to be the main guy there, but no, he hasn't flashed. He's had a couple plays out in space a little bit. He's a completely different style of back than Nick Chubb. Of course, Nick Chubb is one of one when he's healthy and going well, and we hope he can get back soon. Just we, as in general football fans, ought to like to see Nick Chubb at his best. But yeah, Jerome Ford and then the rest of the committee there, not tremendously threatening. I mean, this is a setup for the Raiders to get themselves right at home, flush the awful performance that we saw last week, and get some momentum going into October. This is set up for them quite well.
Could they also take advantage of Myles Garrett not being 100%? I mean, anytime a defensive player of the year is struggling or maybe not playing, got to jump on that. Yeah.
We haven't gotten exact word yet, but Myles Garrett, obviously one of, if not the best player in the NFL, or best defensive player in the NFL, which would also make him right up there with one of the best players in the NFL, struggling with injuries to both of his feet. And the one I'm told is worse than the other one. Went in and had an MRI. Thinks he's probably going to have surgery in the off season, whether or not he can pain manage and load manage the stress that he has on his feet there. That's a big significant factor, because the Browns have to completely shuffle their defense. If they don't have their main dog out there, they've got to be able to come and come up with some exotic pressures and bring an extra man and whatnot, which will allow some shots downfield, whether it's to Devontae Adams or to Brock Bowers, who's looking like he could finish the season as tight end 1 in fantasy this year.
Yeah, that's a compliment to Brock Bowers, but as we know, we play each other, by the way, full disclosure, in fantasy. The tight end position is abysmal right now in fantasy.
It is.
That's another show.
That is one of the most confounding things in fantasy so far this year. Yeah. But hey, good for Brock.
He's have seen recent hope.
Trends. Sorry, say it again?
He's giving people hope. Brock Bowers is giving us hope.
100%. Hey, you use high draft capital on a guy like this. You want to see him produce, and seeing him produce this early is a little bit rare, although we saw Sam Laporta from the Lions having a unique and record-breaking rookie tight end season. But you look at Bauer's numbers, they're starting to be in line, whether it's targets and catches, and he's churning out some yards. Like to see him in the end zone a little bit more. But Bauer's nice player. They really have tapped into something there. And then pair that with Travis Kelce not being Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews not being Mark Andrews, go down the list of would-be elite tight ends. And Bowers is showing out at his position quite well.
By the way, Raider Nation, guess who has Brock Bowers on her fantasy team, who had faith early in me and Scott Hanson's league? It's Amber over here. Had early faith in him. All right, give me a bold prediction. Give me bold prediction. Something we're going to see in this game.
I think the Raiders get right, and I actually think that they're going to be able to turn up I'm not going to say 8 sacks like the Browns gave up last week, but I think you could be looking at 5 sacks in this game. I actually believe that there will be some pressure applied to Deshaun Watson. You'll get him running, moving in the pocket maybe a little bit too much. Get him on the ground, get the crowd into the game, get Gardner Minshew some short, manageable fields, and a few scores could win this game. I do not expect a shootout whatsoever.
Scott, man, it's so good to talk football with you again. It's been a long time. But, hey, we always watch you on NFL Red Zone, and thank goodness for Red Zone, because I fly back from Vegas every Sunday, and I've got it on my phone, and I see my good friend, and you keep me posted on everything. So thanks for spending some time with us.
Always good to be with you, Amber. Have a great rest of the season.
All right, well, he's an Ohio native with a national perspective. NFL Media's Chris Rose is up next on the Silver and Black Show.
Every year, millions fly with us at Allegiant because together, we go places. We see old friends and try new things. We laugh. We really like to laugh. And reconnect. We remember. And we wander, which leads to wonder. From how we go to where we go to what we do when we get there, we go further together.
In 300 feet, turn left.
With Cox's fiber-powered internet, you can do brilliant things.
Exit approaching.
Like upload your voice to Dad's GPS in no time flat.
And I miss you, Daddy. Happy birthday.
Get multi-gig download speeds powered by fiber. Upgrade your internet today with Cox, the nation's fastest internet provider. Limited availability in select areas.
Some days are long, some nights never end. I'm on the fleeting seconds flight. I pray to the coming wind. And timelines never stood around for me. I've loved every sky I've ever seen.
The Silver and Black Show is brought to you by Cox, proud partner of the Las Vegas Raiders. 1800 Tequila, official partner of the Raiders. Taste is everything. Please drink responsibly. And by Allegiant, the official airline of the Raiders. Low fares, non-stop flights, only at Allegiant.com. The Raiders are looking for their first home win of the season Sunday against the Browns. Our next guest, he's going to try to be unbiased, but we know where his heart is. NFL Media's Chris Rose joins us. He's in a box. He's in a glass box of emotion because his Browns are struggling right now. We know you're from Cleveland. You were actually a Browns ball boy? Who was the quarterback at the time of the 47 that they've had in the last 30 years?
Will you stop that?
I'll stop.
All right, we're going to start talking trash on this show. It's,
Who was the quarterback?
Bernie Kosar. Bernie Kosar was the quarterback. And when I was just a young lad and I was a ball boy in the late 80s, we were actually a very good franchise. We won the division 5 times. Now, back then, it was the AFC Central. That's how old it is. We've never won the AFC North, but the AFC Central, and we made the AFC Championship 3 times in 4 years and lost to John Elway, who ripped my heart out. But I don't have to bring that up to Raiders Nation.
Memories. I know you're on a Raiders show here, so let's talk about this Cleveland defense, by the way, was one of the best in the league last year, but through 3 weeks of the season, numerically, they're number 12. You could look at plays and see that they've been struggling at times, but what will you be looking for early against Gardner Minshew and the Raiders offense?
Number one, the health of Myles Garrett. He's really struggling. Feet, thigh, just about everything. But he said, listen, that's what the bye week's for. That's when I'm going to go rest. So he's going to keep playing. I think he loves probably being on the same field as Max Crosby. My guess is those two really admire one another in terms of not only their ability, but the way they play the game, because it's always just full throttle for each of them. So the health of Myles Garrett is one thing. The other thing is that they've got a good young cornerback who's in his 3rd year. His name is MJ Emerson. He was a 3rd-round pick 3 years ago out of Mississippi State, and he's a guy who's going to get a big contract from the Browns probably this offseason. He got worked by Malik Neighbors, the rookie for the New York Giants last week. I want to see if he can bounce back. He's probably going to be matched up a lot against Davante Adams. We'll see how that goes for him. Browns defense is going to have to carry them. If they have any thoughts of winning this game, they have to do a lot more than they've done so far.
To be fair, the secondary did make some adjustments against Neighbors, at least in the second half of that game. It was better, but going up against Davante Adams, the pass-catching crew that the Raiders have, along with the tight ends, Jacoby Myers, how do you see the matchup with not just Emerson, but Denzel Ward, and then that receiving core for the Raiders?
Well, customarily, the Browns have been terrible. You mentioned the tight ends, right? You've got 2 young ones that are very good. Everybody loves Brock Bowers. I love it because he doesn't give a damn about what his hair looks like, and he's just going to go do an interview anyway. So that's my dude right there. Like, what
do you like about Brock Bowers, and what do you think about that matchup, especially Davante Adams? Going up against that secondary.
Yeah, I would say with all of it, it's the Browns secondary is pretty good. I got to say that they were the number 1 defense a year ago, but they were totally different at home than they were on the road. Their lone win this year came against Jacksonville, a team that hasn't won a game. Trevor Lawrence has lost 8 straight starts. So I think this is a real test for the Browns, a real test. And, Gardner Minshew is one of those quarterbacks. We've got one on our roster now in Jameis Winston, who likes to keep his team in the game and the other team in the game too. So he's one of the more interesting dudes out there. He'll throw you a few. It's just whether or not you catch him. Good matchup, though. Really good matchup.
One of the biggest problems with Minshew in the offense, and Davante Adams actually said this, is just they can't find a rhythm. Were you expecting a little bit of a quicker start from the Raiders offense, considering the amount of weapons that Minshew does have?
I mean, that's kind of who Gardner Minshew is a little bit. I think he's going to have a long career because he can morph into something in your system. But like I said, he does throw critical interceptions, and that's a tough thing to swallow. Yeah, I mean, am I surprised they haven't had that big game yet? I don't know. I mean, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, not necessarily. I just hope that you wait another week. Like, go for it, Raiders. I'm all for you. Amber, I want to see everybody happy out there in Las Vegas. It's one of my favorite cities. Just not this week.
Chris, Cleveland's offense clearly has been struggling. They're converting 3rd down only 18% of the time, and that's historically bad. It's like one of the worst since 2015. What do you think, though, is their biggest issue?
I'd like to go with E, Amber. Everything. Everything is their issue. It's the quarterback play. The line has been horrible, and it's banged up. People will rip on the play calling. Devontae Foreman goes 1 week from, 15-ish carries to 2 last week against the Giants. Their receivers cannot separate. They don't have elite speed there. David Njoku has who's become a Pro Bowl tight end, has been unavailable the last 2 weeks. Do you want me to keep going, or should I stop somewhere so that we can discuss?
Well, but the Raiders have to be careful of that because they could have looked at the Panthers the week before they came in here and said similar things. So on any given Sunday, we've been talking about this, somebody can come to life. And Deshaun Watson at one point was a good quarterback, but we have not seen that. He's yet to throw for 200 yards. He's only completing 58% of his passes. I want to ask you as a Browns fan and as a longtime football analyst, can this team win with Deshaun Watson?
It's an interesting question. I call the Browns preseason package on television, and we did not get to see him one time. He didn't take a single snap. And I know that that's not that odd for players these days, but this is a guy who hadn't played at all since mid-November. Remember, he got knocked out by the Ravens. He had shoulder surgery a few weeks later. And he just, quite frankly, has not been very good in his 15 starts with the Cleveland Browns since being obtained in that trade. It's a tough question because I think they can win with him. They are trying to tailor this offense to his best skill set. And I'm not so sure that's what's best for the Browns. Like last year, play action, Joe Flacco throwing the ball deep, that worked. It made them a very dangerous team. And we just haven't seen that enough out of Deshaun Watson, who I would say in his 15 starts has played what I would call 2 very good to elite games. And I think it's a confidence issue with him. I think he's not seeing the field extremely well. That's kind of where we sit with it right now.
Well, the Raiders defense and Raiders fans are hoping that continues, and also looking at a $230 million contract, 3 first-round draft picks. That might go down as one of the worst deals in NFL history if this continues, but we're focused on Sunday. Much like the Browns, the Raiders defense was expected to be this team's strength, but with some injuries, even Coach Pierce said somebody's got to step up other than number 98. Who can you see that being on this Raiders defense?
I mean, I think the defense is okay. I don't know if it was expected to be elite. Christian Wilkins, obviously signing him and putting him on the same line as Max Crosby. Like, you feel like with those are 2 of the best at their respective positions. And that's where that push is going to come from. So, I mean, that's what scares me this week as a Browns fan, is that pass rush could get off and, could cover up some ills that they have in the secondary. I saw that Epps went down for the year. But the Raiders, I think just watching from an outsider's viewpoint, right? I don't cover them on a daily basis, but I watch them every week, just like I watch all 32 teams at NFL Network. And they've got to get the offense right more so than the defense, I would say. I know last week was an abomination, but I really thought that was one that they were kind of set up for. Here comes a veteran in Andy Dalton who has seen everything. Nobody believes in the Carolina Panthers, and then all of a sudden, boom, they just ran like gangbusters. If that happens again and they give up another 36 points to the Browns, then you could say that there's something wrong with the Raiders defense, but I'm not going to go that far right now.
I want you to finish the sentence. The Raiders will win this game if blank.
I would say if they get a half dozen sacks on Deshaun Watson. That seems to be the formula. He's been sacked the most of any quarterback this year. And when they've done a decent job of keeping him clean, they've stayed in the game.
Yeah, didn't keep him upright against the Giants, that's for sure. And the line is just so banged up right now for Cleveland. So we'll see what happens. But you know what? You almost made me feel for you. I just feel your passion for the Browns. And even though, obviously we want the Raiders to win, I feel for you, my friend. It is a painful existence. Diehards out there, stick by your team and take Chris Rose as an inspiration. Stick by them, man, right? No matter who you root for.
That's right. We do have that Browns jersey with all of the quarterbacks' names on the back.
You do. We'll probably throw up a graphic. Yeah, I'll look at it. All right, Chris, thanks so much.
Hey, hold on, Amber. How was my boy Hanson? Was he good? He's low energy, that guy. So
yeah, we needed more energy.
Ladies and gentlemen,
we needed more.
It is time for the witching hour. Here we go.
We're going to the Octabox. All right, we kept you in one box. We don't have the Octabox, but the Red Zone does. Chris, we can't wait to watch you. I know you do the highlights at the end of every Sunday over there on NFL Network. Can't wait to see you out there. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Amber.
All right, coming up, how do the Raiders get right? Raider Nation Radio's Vince Sapienza helps us find the answers next on the Silver and Black Show.
Every year, millions fly with us at Allegiant because together, we go places. We see old friends and try new things. We laugh. We really like to laugh. And reconnect. We remember. And we wander, which leads to wonder. From how we go to where we go to what we do when we get there, we go further together.
Taste is not an option. Taste is everything. 1800, the world's most awarded tequila.
Some days are long, some nights never end. I mark the fleeting seconds glide, I pray to the coming wind. And time like snow never stood around for me. I love every sky I've
Raiders are still looking for their first win at home after laying an egg last week against the Panthers. How will they get it? Well, that's a question for our next guest, Raider Nation Radio's Vince Sapienza. Vince, so good to see you. I like your background there. You at Fox 5 right now?
That's right. We're at Fox 5. We're in the podcast studio. So I decided to whip something up a little nice for you guys over at the Raiders because we all deserve something nice, don't we? So,
Yeah.
very
looks great
excited.
Looks great with your face that big in the screen, so we appreciate it. Vince.
That's the first time I've ever heard that.
We need a bigger face. Vince, how do the Raiders get a win?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like Antonio Pierce himself, it all starts with the run game, and it starts with getting this offensive line in some kind of continuity and some kind of rhythm. That's a buzzword we've heard in the last couple of weeks, the offense finding a rhythm, but the microcosm of the problem, the real root of everything, goes to that offensive line. I mean, when you look at the Baltimore game, 4 yards rushing in the first half, you talk about a team that wants to establish an identity of being physical, of running the ball, two things they have yet to be able to do. So it all starts there, and it sounds simplistic and it sounds pretty basic, but that's where it starts. And if the Raiders can't get to that, then we're going to see more of the same of what we saw in week 1 and week 3.
Sticking with the offensive line, they've given up the 5th most amount of sacks in the NFL, and they are the 2nd worst team in the NFL when it comes to run blocking, according to PFF. So that means right now they can't protect and they can't block. So what do you expect this week, especially against the Browns' defensive line and the fact that Thayer Munford is banged up? We're not sure if he's going to be able to go.
Yeah, well, so I'll start with the right tackle with Thayer Munford. You know, the good news there, I guess the silver lining, if you want to talk about it, is DJ Glaze came in as a rookie in his NFL debut and did not look out of place. Luke Getsy has talked about it. Antonio Pierce has talked about how he seemed to fit right in, and the moment didn't seem too big for him in spot duty in a game that he was not prepared to play in. So that's good news. So obviously you would prefer Thayer there. That there's a reason why he was the starting right tackle to start the season. But if he can't go, I think you can at least rest easy at the moment that DJ Glaze can come in and do the job. But in terms of where this offensive line is as a whole, You can tell by my stature, I am not an offensive lineman. I have never been an offensive lineman, and I do not claim to be an expert on the O-line, but I have spoken to a current offensive lineman in the National Football League to know you can't microwave an offensive line. Meaning you can't just get instant ramen offensive line. It takes time to marinate. You got to put it in the crock pot, let it stew a little bit, let it marinate, and that takes time.
And Vince, like you said, both of us, I definitely was not an offensive lineman, and I'm also not a run game coordinator. But when we look at what we saw from Zamir White in the last 4 games of last year, enough to let Josh Jacobs walk, that was positive. And then seeing what we're seeing this year in a completely different scheme, do you think maybe they should move away from the zone blocking run scheme?
Yeah, I think it definitely needs to be on the table. I was talking with Lincoln Kennedy, Raiders great, Raiders broadcaster, who was saying, you can talk about the scheme, whether it's, power, zone, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, when you get into 2nd and short, 3rd and 1s, 4th and inches, it becomes a mentality at that point. And the Raiders right now are getting stuffed. They're getting beaten at the point of attack. They're getting pushed back when they know the snap count. So, as much as I want to say, yeah, let's change it up and see if something else works, go back to what we saw in the final quarter of the season a year ago where Zamir White was leading the league in rushing yards in that small sample size. But at the end of the day, I'm also with Lincoln. It's a mentality. You have to beat the man in front of you. So whether you're moving to your left and beating that man across from you or going straight up, at the end of the day, they have to win their one-on-one battles. They haven't done enough of that in the first 3 games.
Well, look, why don't we just play pass game coordinator right now while we're on a roll? Davante Adams talked about the rhythm of the offense not being there right now. And we did see rhythm in this offense in the 4th quarter, especially of that Ravens game. We saw it when AOC came in at the end of, granted, it was garbage time against the Panthers. But every time they seem to get in a rhythm, they're going 4 wide, right? And they're spreading it out a bit. Do you think that this should be a pass-first team?
I would love it. I would love to see that. I think the weapons are there, especially when you talk about one of the big phrases was 12 personnel we heard all summer, right? 2 tight end sets, Michael Mayer and the rookie Brock Bowers. Spread them out, Jacoby Myers, Davante Adams. Trey Tucker's an absolute weapon. There are weapons on this offense in the pass game that I think are so far been underutilized, not utilized. And so I would not be against doing that. Do I think at the end of the day you have to find some kind of run game in your offense to have a successful, long sustaining offense? Absolutely. But you're also in the business of winning and finding ways to win now. And I wouldn't be opposed of seeing what that looks like, especially as soon as this week. The fans were restless. Amber, I know you were there and you were inside Allegiant Stadium. It was a rocking crowd. Everyone was fired up and they were disappointed at the end of the day against the Carolina Panthers. And, when we talk about, what do you want your identity to be? We know what they want it to be in terms of a run game, but they also want to be winning games. And so when we saw at the end of the game, yes, it was garbage time, but the beauty of what we saw at the end of the game, specifically in the second half of the 3rd quarter and the 4th quarter, was urgency, right? They were getting in and out of the huddle, or there was no huddle to begin with. So maybe more of that. And being less predictable on first downs. Like Antonio Pierce says, we're going to run the ball until we can't. Well, you're also telling defensive coordinators on runs on 1st and 2nd down, we're going to run the ball.
Yeah, we're always going to run. It becomes predictable. Yeah. And I'll tell you, if you go out there, and I'm not opposed to Gardner Minshew just start throwing the first 7 or 8 passes of the game, just making it a passing game. And then guess what happens? All of a sudden, the run game opens up. So it could be chicken and egg there for sure. Let's talk about how Luke Getsy can create some of the mismatches. You were talking about underutilized players out there. We barely saw the tight ends against the Panthers.
No. And it's so confusing because all we heard was how much they're going to be part of this offense. And while Brock Bowers had an unbelievable game in Baltimore, it was a step backward in a sense in terms of getting him targets, getting him early targets. I understand there's only one football, but him and Davante Adams need to be getting a larger volume of targets earlier on in the game than what they've gotten in the first 3 games. And, the mismatches are there. And there's been throws, and you look back the tape, and there's throws to be had. Sometimes Gardner just needs to go back to, as Max Crosby said, Washington State Gardner. And I get it. He threw, 50 plus times over there in Pullman. And I don't think that's the recipe for success here in Las Vegas. But sometimes Gardner just has to be Gardner and run wild a little bit, live or die with that gunslinger type attitude, because we saw that in the fourth quarter, right? Against Baltimore. And it looked great. Him and Brock Bowers seemed to have found chemistry. Devontae seemed to be eaten as well. I'd like to see Michael Mayer a little more involved in this pass game and some underneath routes and just getting him in space with the ball. It just hasn't happened. Again, I know a product of that is the lack of run game and becoming one-dimensional, but that's on Luke Getsy now. You got to get creative. You've got to find a way to get these playmakers the ball.
Switching to the Raiders defense before I let you go, what would you say is the number one reason they are underperforming? Because they had high expectations.
Yeah, Max Crosby's the tone setter, so not being 100% is obviously not ideal, but it starts with, defending the run. There's 3 straight games where they've given up over 100 yards. For a unit that we touted and we believed and still believe it could be a top 10 type talented unit, they can't stop the run right now. We saw it in the preseason. Pierce said, that's something we need to work on. We're not worried about it. Well, now we're 3 weeks into it, and teams are marching on them because they haven't been able to stop the run. And again, it goes back to the similar conversation we had with the offensive line. Sometimes it's not necessarily just scheme. It's just beating your opponent at the point of attack, having a mental attitude of beating the person in front of you. And so when, you lose Malcolm Kuntz to start the season, that's a big part of it as well. And then Divine Diablo goes down, one of your better run defenders. You get a little thin on that defensive unit. But again, they're not devoid of talent to stopping the run. So they got to find different ways to do it. I don't know if it's scheme or I don't know if it's just better execution, but I know execution was the issue in week 3. And if they can get back to more what we saw in Baltimore in that first half, I think they'll be just fine.
How about this? Take the ball away. How about we start with that on defense? They're -4 in turnover differential, which is towards the bottom of the league. So that's a good place to start as well, right after stopping the run. Hey, thanks for being with us, Vince. I want to ask you about Raider Nation Radio Morning Tailgate. You will be there on Sunday morning. Tell us where we can hear it. What you got going?
Yeah, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Myself, Vinny Bonsignor, and Clay Baker on the morning tailgate, we're breaking down everything. We have once a Raider, always a Raider. So every Wednesday we talk to a Raider alumnus. We talk to our guy, Eric Allen, for Monday morning cornerback every Monday. So we break down the good, the bad, the ugly. We tear you down, but then we build you back up by the end of the week. So Raider Nation Radio 920, and you can get them on the Raiders website as well in podcast form.
We just call that keeping it real. That's a good thing. That's not tearing people down. That's sticking to the facts. All right, thanks for being with us, Vince. We appreciate it. We'll see you out there on Sunday. Coming up, why Next Man Up is more than just a cliche. It's one last thing ahead on the Silver and Black Show.
In 300 feet, turn left.
With Cox's fiber-powered internet, you can do brilliant things.
Exit approaching.
Like upload your voice to Dad's GPS in no time flat.
And I miss you, Daddy. Happy birthday.
Get multi-gig download speeds powered by fiber. Upgrade your internet today with Cox, the nation's fastest internet provider. Limited availability in select areas.
Every year, millions fly with us at Allegiant because together, we go places. We see old friends and try new things. We laugh. We really like to laugh. And reconnect. We remember. And we wander, which leads to wonder. From how we go to where we go to what we do when we get there, we go further together.
Taste is not an option. Taste is everything. 1800, the world's most awarded tequila.
The Silver and Black Show has been brought to you by Cox, proud partner of the Las Vegas Raiders, Ticketmaster, the official ticket marketplace of the Las Vegas Raiders and the NFL, and by Allegiant, the official airline of the Raiders. Low fares, non-stop flights, only at Allegiant.com. Raiders.com is your home for all things Silver and Black, featuring exclusive interviews with players and coaches, breaking news, and daily content. Raiders.com keeps you up to date all season long. Time now for one last thing. Teams that win consistently in the NFL, they don't necessarily have the best players, they are the best teams. Contenders are always the sum of their parts, undefined by one single player. Look at the Packers. Right now, they're 2-0 without Jordan Love, their quarterback. Backups will always be asked to step up. And if the Raiders are going to get back in the win column, a banged-up Max Crosby cannot be the only game changer on defense.
Our effort, our energy, our passion did not show up yesterday. And that just can't always be 98. I mean, we obviously, you know what 98's dealing with. You see it. He gave it all he had yesterday, and we got to protect the player. But more importantly, there's 10 other guys on the field. They got to play to a high level.
10 other guys. The Raiders were predicted to have a top defense, but right now they are the third worst defense in the NFL. And look at this. According to PFF, 39 is the number of missed tackles by Raiders defenders. That's basic fundamentals. Only the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are worse. So with plenty of talent not wearing 98, who's it going to be?
You know, injuries are a part of the game. Things happen. Really just other guys have to improve and step up when, you know, when there's bang-ups, when there's injuries and things like that. There's no excuses to be made. You know, if you're dressing in uniform, you got a job to do. It doesn't matter who's out there ultimately. You know, you got to do your job, and, you know, if you're out there, you got to go and perform at a high level.
There's a 100% injury rate in the NFL. Losing star players is guaranteed throughout the season. Finding ways to win regardless of who goes down is mandatory. This Sunday, the Raiders have a chance to beat a struggling Browns team who's also banged up. But the question is, who will be the unusual suspects that emerge to get a team win? That'll do it for us. It's Browns-Raiders 125 kickoff from Allegiant Stadium. We'll see you out there. Have a great weekend, everyone.